It may sound funny, but it's not a joke. The last two Southern Jaguar head football coaches are now on the Grambling staff as coordinators. Oh, yeah. It's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusions. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every moment more. And if you're new to FanDuel, you get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 bet. Today's all about coordinators. That's what it's all about. Offensive and defensive. Coordinators leaving. Coordinators returning. So you got PV returning a former player to be their offensive coordinator. Tennessee State is in the mood, in the search, in the market for a new offensive coordinator. Meanwhile, Grambling just brought on a new offensive and defensive coordinator, and guess who it is? It's the last two men to be the head coach of the Southern Jaguars. And this sounds like a joke. It sounds like something somebody would just say to be funny. It sounds like Grambling is trolling Southern. It sounds like, I'm be honest with you, it sounds like Grambling is getting Southern sloppy seconds. I'm just going to be straightforward with you. That's what it sounds like. I don't know if it's going to be a bad thing, being a coach and being a coordinator, two completely different responsibilities, but it surely feels like you went to the rival and said, you ain't worked there, you could come over here. Ain't what they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In this case, the enemy of my enemy is my coordinator. I don't know. But what I do know is that Eric Dooley and Jason Rollins are now offensive and defensive coordinators for Grambling. And this just feels a little bit weird to me. Obviously, Dooley was the last head coach. Dooley was with Southern from 2022 to 2023. It was just a 2-year span. Prior to him, it was Jason Rollins, who was an interim head coach, but he didn't join in halfway through the year. They just gave him the interim title prior to the season. I don't know if either one of these men hold any ill will towards Southern, but I will tell you this. Grambling versus Southern, the Bayou Classic, is always a big deal. Every coach really wants to beat the opposing team. But I would imagine that even if there is no ill will, Dooley and Rollins likely want to beat Southern more than the other coaches do. And they already want to beat them a lot. So, let's just think of it that way. With Dooley, it's interesting. Dooley is the more interesting one. So we're going to spend the majority of this segment looking at Eric Dooley. He's coming to Grambling, a place where he reached a lot of prominence. Like, this was a spot for him that was very successful. But he's coming this time looking for redemption. This time, as he comes to Grambling, he's coming off of a really bad head coaching tenure at Southern. And he's looking to show that he still got the magic, because quite frankly, his offense struggling the way that it did out there in Baton Rouge was one of the biggest surprises, for me at least, of his tenure. Because everywhere else he's gone, he's been a good offensive mind, but he couldn't get the right quarterback. Thankfully for him, he doesn't have to worry about that this time. They have Miles Crawley. He doesn't. Let me see how I want to say this. It's not as if he has a bad track record, but he doesn't hold the same luster that he had prior to going to Southern. I'll say that. That's how I put it. He doesn't have the same luster that he had 2 years ago. Things look bad and people are questioning him, rightfully so. Maybe he's lost it because At PV, it's not as if he had bad offense. Let me read some of these stats that I got from his PV time frame. And these are stats that will make Miles Crawley get very, very excited. Multiple 60-point games in a season, 3 of them to be exact. 815 yards in a game. 4th in passing yards. Like, as I'm saying these things, Miles Crawley should say, interesting. So when I say the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or in this case, the enemy of my enemy is my coordinator, well, now Eric Dooley is your offensive coordinator, former Southern head coach. Jason Rollins is your defensive coordinator, former Southern head coach. This is just weird. Even a running back coach came from Southern. It just feels like the sloppy seconds, but maybe it's a recipe for success. Dooley is the one I have all of my eyes on because he needs redemption. He needs to show I still got that 15 to 17 Grambling in me. He needs to show I still got that PV tenure in me. He needs to show that I am no longer who I was at Southern. And I don't even know if no longer is the right way to say it. Maybe say that Southern was an aberration. Because if it isn't, we might be seeing the last of Dooley. And listen, he has gone and had offensive success elsewhere. But 2 years looking the way that he looked, it really does make me wonder if the game's passed him by. It does. I'll just be honest with you. Now you get into Jason Rollins. Oh, also 31 points per game when he was there at Grambling. A national championship, multiple SWAC West titles, multiple SWAC championships. Like, you have to hope that you return to prominence. But it is hard to be excited. It's hard to be excited, but at least you have the quarterback. Miles Crawley is better than any quarterback that he had over the last 2 years. So at least he has that. Then you look at Jason Rollins, and this is a little simple. Like I said, we're not going to really stress this one. We're just going to touch on this very briefly and then move on. But Jason Rollins, he was the interim head coach at Southern, only got a year. It wasn't really a great year. I don't know if he could hold any ill will to that. I know Dooley probably doesn't like the way that he went out, but hey, whatever, it is what it is. Rollins, he only had 4 wins. He went 4-7 in an interim season. Yeah, nothing's coming from that. I don't think he can hold any ill will. But what does he provide as a defensive coordinator? Forget the storyline of revenge and all of the other crap. What does he provide as a defensive coordinator? He was a defensive mind, and he comes over from, I think it was Louisiana Monroe, but he's been all around the state. He came from UTSA, which is in Texas, University of Texas at San Antonio. And where he was there, it was a good defense. It was stiff all around. That's when he was a defensive coordinator. You saw his 3 levels. You saw defensive line, linebackers, and then you saw safeties and cornerback. So it was a little bit more of a well-rounded defense. But what I'm really looking at is, can he get ball production out of the secondary? Because that's what he did when he was at Tulane. When he was at Tulane, you started seeing him get ball production immediately with pass deflections. Then those pass deflections started to begin to become interceptions. And then those interceptions became to be one of the top 25 in the nation. And you started getting your hands on interceptions, started forcing and recovering fumbles. And that secondary became a real surge of turnovers and game-changing plays. So now the question becomes, can you do that again? It's not as exciting as Dooley, but it's there. And it's very strange to me. This is not a joke when I tell you, the past 2 Southern head coaches are now on the Grambling State coaching staff as offensive and defensive coordinators. I call it sloppy seconds, but hey, at least you eating, huh? To each his own. But as we continue, Tennessee State, on the other hand, they don't have their coordinators. They're looking for their offensive coordinator because Tyler Roehl is no longer going to be in that position. He hadn't even coached a game yet. Let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Now, how you riding? Riddle me that, Batman. How you riding? Are you riding in style? Are you struggling? Is that check engine light still on? Do you know you have a part that needs to be replaced? Is there things going on? You like, you know what? I need to take care of this, but I just don't feel like it. Or maybe I don't feel like paying the money, especially if it comes down to the finances. I'm going to tell you right now, the only place I would suggest for you to go is ebaymotors.com. It's going to have the best prices and the best quality. We don't want cheap and cheap. We want low price, but quality. That's what we looking for. Cheap and cheap, lead that in 2023. We coming for low price and quality, and that's what you get at eBay Motors. So all you have to do is put your car, whether it's let's say you have a 2009 Honda Accord. You put your 2009 Honda Accord into the My Garage section, and they will only tell you the pieces that are going to fit for your car. If it doesn't fit, you get your price back, money back guaranteed, no question about it. So all you have to do is go to ebaymotors.com and fix your vehicles. No more delays. Just go ahead and go to ebaymotors.com today. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, but they be jocking because we trendsetters and all of that other good stuff. But you go ahead and go to Locked On Sports Today. It'll be the first of its kind, 24/7 live sports network on YouTube. Now, I told you today's all about coordinators. Every day is I appreciate you for going on this ride. We're done with that Grambling section. We're moving on to Nashville. We're moving on to Tennessee State. So they're in the market for a new coordinator because Tyler Roehl is now going to be the Iowa State running backs coach and assistant head coach. And it's a tough one. Let's look at what it means for Roehl first. And I understand that a lot of people aren't going to necessarily be invested in Roehl because he hasn't been here. So maybe his next moves hold a little bit less weight. But I do think that this is a monumental moment. Like, this is something that I don't track all of FCS coaching, but I can track what happened this year with Roehl and then also Ince, who was his head coach at North Dakota State. And then we'll get into the ramifications for Tennessee State. But Roehl was the offensive coordinator at North Dakota State prior to coming to Tennessee State. I'm going to call it TSU because it's a lot of words, but trust me, I don't mean that. But Roehl was at North Dakota State. His head coach left to go to USC to become a linebackers coach and assistant coach. So once your head coach leaves, a lot of times you're going to leave too. They end up getting an offensive head coach. There's no need for him now out there at I don't know where they are. Ain't they in Fargo? Is that where North Dakota State is? I think they're in Fargo. Either them or South Dakota. But they're in Fargo, okay? North Dakota. So he comes on to Tennessee State. Big grab. Everybody was excited. But now you're looking at going from an FCS program as an offensive coordinator to being a positional coach and an assistant head coach at a FBS Power 4 program. I was proud I got that right because Power 4 does not roll off the tongue. But he essentially did the same thing that his head coach did. So he came from a lower position to the same position. Now, granted, the head coach is at USC, a much more prestigious school. But if you're looking at FBS Power 4, it's the same type of leap, except Roehl came from lower. I think that this is a monumental move. So shout out to him. Happy for him. I believe that Iowa State coming in and grabbing him before he could even coach a game speaks volumes of what kind of hire this was. Everybody was excited about it already. Everybody. And I mean, of course, Tennessee State fans were excited, and I think this has to do with them being in an HBCU or being an HBCU independent, but everybody was excited for him because there's nobody who really feels that competitive, like even if you went to Jackson State with the Southern Heritage Classic, which they're not in anymore, yeah, they might not be super excited, but they're not going to down it because they don't have to face them multiple times. Like it's different. Tennessee State has no impact on what any other HBCU is able to achieve. So I think that's why everybody was like, oh, they ain't competitive. They're not competitors. Let's be excited for them. This was a big move. Like this was something that the excitement was felt everywhere. And the thought was that he'll be able to revolutionize the offense. He'll be able to turn things around, and that was going to be the missing piece. I think that was the belief and the hope when you got him. I don't know. It's one of those things where I kind of wish it didn't happen. Like, if I was Tennessee State in their shoes, I would have wished that I just never saw him, right? Like, you never truly had Roehl because he didn't coach a game for you. But at the same time, I had the same excitement. I was able to believe like this was a big moment. I wish I just didn't get that excitement. Then it was taken away from me. The most difficult part about this is that he didn't coach a game, which means there's nobody who really you want to say, we're going to move you up. Tennessee State fired their offensive coordinator. Their offense wasn't good enough. You can't promote from within. So now you're in that same situation that I spoke about Grambling for being in. Not Grambling, but Jackson State. That's what it was. I spoke about Jackson State, and they were in a bad position where, hey, your offensive and defensive coordinator that left. I'm like, all right, now you're going on to look for another person at the position pretty late. We're going into March now. Spring ball ain't that far away. Spring ball is not that far away. So you got to go ahead and go on the hurry up and try to find your new offensive coordinator. And it's probably not going to be a great option. You had a phenomenal hire. You would have had one of the best, probably the best offensive coordinator in the OVC Big South. Probably would have had that. Dang. I just thought about this. With North Carolina A&T leaving the Big South when they did, we missed out on them having a battle with Tennessee State because those two conferences merged right as A&T left. Interesting. Anyway, where was I with that? I had a brain fart when I had my discovery. But so basically, Roehl's experience is not something you're gonna find elsewhere. It just isn't. But I will say that Georgia's ability to recruit somebody like Roehl speaks volumes to what he's able to do as a recruiter in the pool that he has. Maybe he can bring in a big name. Maybe he can bring in somebody who is not at Roehl status, but is still a real big name guy. We'll have to wait and see. That's something that's going to interest me, but whenever it happens, we'll report it. Now, as we continue, we have another team who has found their offensive coordinator, and Prairie View found their OC in the form of a former player who was on a championship team. Let's look at that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, if you're new to FanDuel, say I've been talking about this for a while and you're an everydayer, but you just now decided to go ahead and check it out. That's fine. Ain't no sweat off my back. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make sure that you use the code LOCKEDON, because if you're new to FanDuel and use the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, you will get $150 back in bonus bets if you put down a $5 winning bet. But you don't get those benefits if you don't put down the code Locked On. And if you've already been on FanDuel, there's a reason that you keep going back and keep going back and keep going back, because you know how good it is for you. You've been lacing your pockets with a little bit more money. Maybe you're doing the live bets. Maybe you're going pregame, right? You have the Pelicans and Pacers was last night. I'm recording this 10 minutes into the game. I have no idea who won, but you can make some money on that game. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every moment more. As wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Anthony Weeden is bringing back a history of receiving success as a coach to Prairie View, and is a little bit of a homecoming of a situation. Now, I wanted to make sure I made it clear that his receiving success is as a coach. I'm not speaking about what he did as a player, okay? But he was on that 2009 championship team. A homecoming for Weeden, that probably means a lot, because that's the only time that PV has won a championship since moving to a championship game in the 99 to the 2000, right? Like, that was the only time. And you know, there's old heads who were still there from 15 years ago who remember Weeden, who remember who he was on that team, remember him as an All-American, as a return specialist. There's people who remember that aspect of him. But I don't want to make it seem like we relying too much. He was an explosive receiver, nearly 20 yards per catch. This was, return specialist turned wide receiver, or wide receiver who is a return specialist type of usage. But it's not just the old head saying, we remember you, boy, because that's a big deal. Like, and I talk trash about PV, but one thing about me is I'm going to give credit what credit is due. That's a big deal, being a part of the championship team. For many people, that it broke a 45-year gap. So, like, for many generations, or a couple of generations, this is all they know as far as championship goes. We talking about in the last 60 years, This is the championship team. You know, they still up in the halls. You know, they still talked about. You know, you still see his face along with other Panthers from that season. This is a big deal to return. And I almost undersold it, but I want to make sure that I recognize how big this is. But you don't have to reminisce. That's the thing. You can sit back and talk about what he did in 2009 as a player, but when you look at what he's done as a coach, it's no need for you to look back and say, oh, this is what it used to be like. So the former receiver has a strong line of success as a coach with getting receivers to be good. You look at 2012. I'm only going to go through a few moments instead of going through the whole resume. But 2012, he was at Northwestern. And when he was at Northwestern, his top receiver went down, I think, about a quarter, maybe halfway through the season. And he still ended up breaking records, not the player, but the team. The team ended up breaking records of passing numbers. Now, what that tells me is that you have a guy who, even when your top player is down, is still able to get success. If my number one receiver goes down and I still have a really good receiving year, A, there's talent. That's clear. We will not take that away. But then B, that means I'm coaching well. That is a sign of coaching. It's a sign of quarterback skill. It's a sign of wide receiver depth. It's a sign of the ability to coach and have everybody ready. That whole next man up mentality is nice to say, but not everybody is good at it. Not every team is good at doing the next man up. And you look at not only this opportunity, but the next one I'm about to bring up as well. It shows that Weeden is able to succeed in next man up type of situations. So let's go into his most recent stop, because I told you I'm not going to give the whole he was at this school and he was at this school and he was at this school. If you want to look that up, look up Anthony Weeden, Prairie View A&M, and they'll give you his whole coaching resume. All you have to do is click on his bio that's now on the PV Athletic website. But I'm not doing that. I want to highlight a specific quality of Weeden, and that's his ability to get success out of his receivers in less than optimal conditions. We've seen that at Northwestern. Remember, number one guy goes down, you still end up breaking school records for receiving and passing totals. That's on coaching plus depth plus quarterback play. But let's talk about when you don't have the optimal quarterback play. And now he's as an offensive coordinator. And in 2022, they led the conference when he was at Campbell in passing while starting 3 different quarterbacks. Who do you think that goes to? It goes to wide receivers. It goes to next man up. It goes to the coaching. Being able to do that is not easy. It's what we all strive for. It's what we all talk about. Hey, next man up. Let's rally and cry. But it's a rallying cry because you're having to overcome the odds. And I've seen him overcome the odds at Campbell. I've seen him overcome the odds at Northwestern. So if I can see you without your best receiver, if I can see you with having to play the quarterback musical chairs and you still have success in both of those situations, I'm going to assume that if I can hopefully, right, if I can come through with good health, you'll have good offense here. But you know what? Maybe you're not sold by that. Maybe you feel like there's ways to go around all of that. And okay, whatever, because he had an All-American receiver at Campbell as well. Maybe you want to talk about that. Well, contextually, forget all of that. The best achievement that Weeden has is he won the Graphite Award, which is the award for the best play caller in every D1 conference. And he won that in the Big South in 2022. This man literally won an award for being a really good play caller. What other qualifications do I need to be a head coach or to be an offensive coordinator? Mike Minter left Campbell, so now he's gone. Who knows if Minter would have stayed? Maybe he would have stayed. But Anthony Weeden in 2022 won the Graphite Award for being the most efficient play caller in the Big South. So tell me this. How can you not be excited when you bring in a guy who literally won an award for his ability to call plays, and now he's your offensive coordinator? If there's anybody who should be upset, it's me. I don't want to have to face somebody who's an award-winning play caller. But you know what? I'll see you on Labor Day, and I'll see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll be looking at, it's Feature Friday. We'll be looking at the one time that HBCUs faced each other in March Madness. I can't wait to tell this story. I thought it was very cool, and I want to share it with you. So until then, till next time that we hear each other, family, you can follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.